Now that you've completed the assignment and you've completed the notes, you come to what I think is the most important part of this particular taking notes, and it's the idea of a summary. Now, I'm not asking you to write a summary because I enjoy reading paragraphs about what's been taught in the video. Believe me, I know it's there. But this is the most effective strategy in trying to relate and understand the material is in putting it in your own words. So, you are going to be responsible for summarizing any lecture that you hear. And it's the idea that you need to summarize the main ideas of the lecture. So don't just list them, but say, we learned about scientific notation and what it's used for. So scientific notation is used to express large and small numbers easily. So you're saying what the main idea of it is. Now, you identify any content that needs to be memorized, and you would do this for all the main ideas. And then what you need to do is you would identify the content that needs to be memorized. So, okay, what things do I need to memorize from this lecture? And I would say, okay, well, I need to memorize metric conversions. And you would actually write this out and say, I need to memorize metric conversions, I need to memorize the 42 elements of the periodic table. You would also identify any problem-solving strategies that were discussed. So something like the idea of dimensional analysis. And you would say, I would use dimensional analysis when I convert between quantities because blah, 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 blah. But the key aspect, even though you're doing these are really summaries and saying, okay, this is what I should do, and this should be in your summary. The key to this is the application of the knowledge to your real world scenario. So, for example, do you ever have to deal with things that are very, very large numbers or very small numbers? Maybe, maybe not. Have you ever worked with tools where you had a 9 millimeter and then a 9 millimeter socket and then a 3/16 of an inch and they didn't fit? Okay, well, of course they didn't because they're not the same size. So think of real world scenarios where you've had to deal with things like parts of the whole. And then the last thing that you want to do is you want to link any reading that your instructor has provided to go with these notes. For example, here is a link that covers several metric mix-ups that are situations in which somebody incorrectly converted or failed to convert units and it had a real world effect on people and programs and things like that. So you're expected to summarize the main ideas. You're expected to identify the content that has to be memorized, identify the problem solving strategies, and then apply those things to something in your life. Okay? And then finally link this particular reading to the ideas in this summary. The very last thing that you need to do, and this summary should take a while when you first start them, you start to get the feel for them as you go later, but then you need to do one of the following. Okay, this is how I check to see if you understand. You say, I fully understand all the material and I will demonstrate that knowledge by writing a proficient or higher level question. We'll talk about proficiencies and all those sort of things later. But you're going to write a question that's actually covering the material, not saying, how do you convert between millimeters and meters or something simplistic like that. I want you to take this and say, okay, what sort of question will I be asked on the test over this material? And you should know that you're not going to get questions like, if I have 1 millimeter, how many meters is that, or something like that, because that's very simplistic. Okay, option number two is you would say, I'm having difficulty with, and then identify what you're struggling with. Say, I'm having problems with dimensional analysis. Okay, and I plan to do the following. And it can be any of these things. But when you identify that you have a problem, identifying the problem is saying, I've got a problem, now I've got to address it. And you can address it any of these ways. You can just say, hey, I'm going to ask about it in class. I'm going to say, hey, I didn't get dimensional analysis. Can you go over that? And I'd be happy to. Or you can say, hey, I'm going to come into tutorials and say, I think everybody else gets this, but it's something that I don't quite get. That's perfectly fine too. You also have other resources such as your textbook, or you have things like the internet that you can Google. You can do a Google search and you can figure out any sort of tutorials over this material. But the key thing is that when you identify a problem, you come up with some sort of way to fix the problem before you have a quiz, before you have a test. So now this completes the summer assignment. I hope you enjoy the rest of your summer, and we will look forward to seeing you in August.